Hey everyone, it's Greg Plotkin from American Farmland Trust, back with another episode of Farming in a Pandemic. Today, I'm proud to be joined by Futuma Emmad. She is the co-founder, executive director, and head farmer at Frontline Farming in Denver, Colorado, as well as the president of Mile High Farmers. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I was wondering, I like to start out these conversations, if you'll just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Frontline Farming in Denver.
Sure, yeah. So like Greg said, my name's Fatuma, based here in Denver. We serve a few counties around the Denver area. And a little bit about myself. So political scientist by training. I'm originally from Ethiopia and Yemen. I was born in Denver and grew up a lot of my life in Ethiopia as well. So really grew up doing political science with an eye towards food specifically, and did a lot of my work in Eastern and Southern Africa, working on genetically modified organisms and how they're being pushed there and resistance around that. A lot of my work doing that informed me that I needed to be a good farmer, so that I could ask better questions instead of giving prescriptions at macrocosmic levels. So I became a farmer started getting into growing about 15 years ago, and really started officially farming probably about 12 years ago. Went through a program in Santa Cruz in agroecology and sustainable food systems. Made that choice because a lot of the paths to becoming a farmer can be difficult. Couldn't really afford apprenticeship models, didn't feel safe in that space, still needed to make money for myself and my family. Was lucky to get a scholarship in that program. It also it really catapulted me in terms of the job industry. There's many ways you could get to a level of being a farm manager. I'm a small woman. A lot of times when compared with other people, I might not have been the first choice, but I chose to go through that program to kind of give me a bonus there and get me in positions to take farm managing jobs. Did that. Specialized particularly in fruit tree and small farms. So love doing fruit tree work as well. So yeah, here we started our own nonprofit in Denver, Colorado about end of 2018. Before that, I was operating the same programs under a different nonprofit. One of the things that we learned in our farm work is that, we need to take control of our own narratives. Also, as Black and Brown people, we need to take control of our own narratives. We need to make sure that our people are compensated fairly. So much of the times in nonprofit work, I see that where they have farming programs, it's always justifying the labor for that, whereas people in the administration are taking cuts, but really we're the people on the ground. And so we started our organization, picked up the lands I was already managing, expanded. We're at 5 acres. We are a POC-led organization and a women-led organization. We believe those are our assets and we lead with those assets. Yeah, so that's a little bit about what we're doing here on the Front Range.
Great. So you're a nonprofit farm, and how you support your programs, or one of the ways that you support your programs, is that you sold your products to local restaurants and institutions. And because of the coronavirus pandemic, schools are out of session, restaurants are closed, farmers markets, if they're happening, maybe they're not as busy as they were before. What impact has that had on you and your organization? And then how are you dealing with that programmatically?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So to take a step back, a part of creating our narrative, our organization specifically is a farmer advocacy and a food justice organization. So it means we're really conscious about how we're distributing our food. But for us, what a farmer advocacy organization means is that we pay our farmers salary and we provide them with the best benefits that we can. In relation to, so we chose profit and nonprofit farmed. I was part of a farming cooperative in Wisconsin where I farmed for a long time for immigrant farmers. So I know the challenges of both. Sure. Farming for a long time for profit and making sort of my living in that way. I know the challenges. I know that it's almost impossible to. I know that the price scale at which we're selling. I know that in the US and in farming, it's one of the only specific industries, are, as it were, where we don't get to set the price on our products. And that puts us in a lot of binds. We also know that the US spends less than 7% of our income towards food. Of course, it varies. That's an average. So, you know, there's a huge issue in why farmers aren't paid and who's doing the labor in the US and why it's skewed in such a downward way, which we could talk about. So that said, we are unique in that, yeah, we want to be have education. Education is so important. That accessibility for people, people like me, to let them know there is a path for them, that the land is here for them, to bring people into food. People always talk about fresh food in communities that are lacking access, and that we just need to get a veggie mobile and people are going to run out like there's an ice cream truck coming down the road. But that's not the reality. There are many reasons and conditions that created the choices that people feel they can make and the access that they do have. So thinking a little deeper about that. So we choose to be education. We find that to be a component of sovereignty. I teach at CU Boulder in the master's program. My colleague and I, Damien, started a program at Regis University in community food systems. So we have 10 students every year that actually have to do farming work as well as theory, get placed in good places because we make them work hard on the farm. Oh, so yeah. we choose to sort of be a nonprofit because I know that I want to commit to paying my farmers and that we're intelligent enough to access the money that's out there for farming communities and for fresh food in our communities, and that we're committed to that. And so we've been able to reflect that. Farmers are smart. They can do computer work if they're paid for it. We just want to be in the field, and we have a lot of resonance there. But when called on last year, we were willing to step into that role and do that. We've always been really serious, for me as a for-profit farmer, production, right? I know the challenges of dealing with nonprofits as a farmer, that they begin to undersell products, that they begin to undersell sort of the cost of the labor. There's so many problems there. So we've always been really serious about production because that's the only way I think that a farm can be run. Certainly having the education component has caused me to shed some tears on days where you have volunteers that come in and take out all your dahlias and they're so proud. They're like, man, that was so hard to pull those, you know? So, you know, we have to hold standards of production and yet find ways where every one of our farmers is trained to do education as well. And so, you know, it's hard. I think if you ever work with volunteers and people you're educating in a farm, we know the challenges of, you know, people think farming is sexy and they show up and it's like, bring me a full wheelbarrow, not a half one, you know?
So how are you coping in this world that you don't have access to volunteers anymore, right? Like you can't just bring people out to the farm. So how are you as a organization dealing with that?
That's a good question. One is mechanizing. So we bought a tractor just to help us with some of our bigger you know, we're very minimal to no-till. We do things all by hand. We double dig our beds. We did an expansion into our 2-acre farm. We double dug all 1 acre in 1 year. This year, that's not going to be possible. We're a skeleton crew of 5 farmers. So trying to adjust, but really keeping in mind the sacredness and our sort of obligations to our soil and our land. Really trying to hire a couple more laborers to come and help us as we're increasing our production as well. Food need is being recognized. In terms of like sales, you know, there's a lot we could talk about there. But one way that we've adjusted is, you know, our CSAs, we increased those. We sold a lot of them. I had to stop sales and reserve a certain amount right now to ensure SNAP and double dollar people get them. You know, it's this hard thing where it's like you want to capture whatever sales you can right now. We're also supposed to be selling at another farmer's market and things like that. I'm trying to minimize and, you know, pre-sell what we can, but also CSAs and farmers markets like that are not necessarily meeting the food needs of our communities. So what we're trying to do, there's all this federal nutrition dollar money coming that's, you know, from how people and children were being fed at schools to increases in SNAP and pantry assistance dollars. So we're doing things like grouping up with the pantries in our neighborhood or where we know it's young children and that's a point of need, and writing the grant for the pantry so that they can pay us that money for the fresh food. So using our intellect to capture that market as well.
And you also run some pay-as-you-go markets or farm stands. How does that work? Or
So
pay what you can, rather.
Yeah, so all our farm stands, we offer a pay what you can model. That means you can come, we, write down what the total price would be on an envelope. People put in the money that they're able to pay. Obviously, if you're using SNAP or double dollars, you can't do both. That's just how it works. It's really simple. Humans respond pretty well to that kind of trust. It allows people to try new things when they don't have a lot of money. And then when people do have money, they'll give us more. And sometimes people on average give us more, and it usually averages out pretty well.
And I mean, and you're planning to do that again this year, and it seems like there could be some real need for that.
Yeah, so like I'm saying, this year we're really trying to avoid having any avenues of market sales, even considering, the market, the farmers market we're a part of. If we have the ability to resell our food, to not get too deep into the online platforms with having to estimate every week and have a whole person to do that job. If I have opportunities, I also want to make sure it's going to the communities I want to serve. And I got to be honest that farmers markets are the first people buying and able to pay for CSA shares are not necessarily those people. They support us as farmers. They're important. But we got to step back and say, how are we getting food to the communities that most need it? And how can we guarantee that as farmers that food is being purchased?
Yeah. So, I mean, these conversations tend to be short. We don't have a lot more time, but I want to turn it over to you. And I want you to talk about why your work with the communities that you work with, why is it so important, not just now, during this coronavirus crisis where people are stressing a little bit more about food, but every day, why do you do this? What do you want people to know about why you do this?
Yeah, I guess, growing up and traveling between two countries and seeing such disparity in food access, and Ethiopia being a place that was considered a place of famine, yet knowing that it's a place that's so topographically beautiful, a grain basket of the world, had made me reflect a lot on how food and those who have and don't have are represented, and both in a distribution sense of burdens and things that they are able to get, and a procedural sense of how we set the table so that people are a part of making decisions about the food system. And of course, the history of how we've guaranteed those things. So, even being in the US, it just really, really affects me to see those same disparities in our communities. I think that one of the biggest problems that we know that we're facing, and even in food systems work, is people want to talk about all these other points, but don't really want to talk about the major contributors to the main issues. And it's really easy when we can classify people in certain ways. So what I think a lot about is the people that really toil in the soil are 80% of farm laborers who are immigrant. Of that, only a quarter being H-2A visas, which people like to focus on. And oftentimes I'm invited into rooms where we've created rooms where we've guaranteed that those people can't legally show up. And so in this time particularly, my concern is how we as farmers are standing up for those people. I know we're often pitted against each other, and I know that we don't make enough to raise wages for our immigrant laborers, that we ourselves are, we always say, I wish I could pay myself so much. And I understand that, but there's a problem in the system. And this is a problem that's inherited from slavery into our immigrant workers now. And the last thing I'd say is I'd like people to reflect on just what kinds of attitudes and notions allow that. So a lot of times right now we hear people in the ag community talking about, well, we know beef is at a high, but the problem is that we're going to have problems in the supply chain down the line. And so when people say things like that, as researchers, as farmers, as activists, I'd like you to reflect on what that means. A lot of it is an assumption that at the labor point, people are going to be getting sick because we're not protecting them. And yet those people are sacrificable. And so as an economic argument, I would posit that we should be thinking more about our robust food system so that we create safety for all of us, and not perhaps these industries getting shut down and then bailed out at the cost of human life right now. So.
Yeah, and I think it's not just farmers. I mean, I think a lot of our food system relies on immigrants and people of color, whether that's in meat packing plants, truck drivers, there's a lot of essential workers. I think we're realizing that, aren't supported the way that people in other industries are, whether that's because of their race or their immigration status or whatever. So I just think it's so important that we have people like you that are raising those issues, because this is the time, to raise them. Like, this is when I feel like people are more visible maybe than they've ever been,
Yeah. And our hospitals, 1 out of 7 doctors.
Yeah. Didn't mean to leave out our hospitals. It's everything.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. So yeah, we like to think about the future of the food system, not just responding to crisis and finding the spaces in the hearts and minds of people to create the real change that we all need to create sustainability for us, greater healthiness, equity, the things that I think we all desire as Americans.
I think that if we're not learning that from this current crisis, I don't know what we should be learning. This is a food system that this crisis has laid bare, that is not working for a lot of people. And if we're not learning, if we're not trying to do better, if we're not trying to improve, I don't know. I don't know what the future is going to look like, but I know it's going to be brighter because we've got people like you that are fighting for it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would just say the word of caution that I would leave on, that I had spoken to Craig about, is that in all the work we're doing right now, we have to really reflect and make sure that we're not rushing into Band-Aid old systems. We're in a state of crisis and we want to guarantee our survivals, but that we are trying to think about everything we're doing towards that future food system and not just upholding the same old. So.
Well, I appreciate so much you taking the time to speak with me today. And I hope you're staying safe out there in Denver.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for thinking my voice was worth hearing and valuing it. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.